That's why I like watching you guys' shows is for things like that because I go, oh yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I want to see Peacemaker. If you ever see Peacemaker riding a dinosaur, you know it's because of you, not
Uh,
because I thought of that on my own.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. I had a chance to speak with James Gunn one on one on the future of the DCU, including the next Superman movie, Man of Tomorrow, New Gods stuff like Darkseid, major characters, what's happening with that Salvation Planet from the end of Peacemaker, and a bunch of the other upcoming movies and TV shows like Lanterns, the Supergirl movie. So we'll break down everything that we talked about. It was actually pretty cool. There wasn't any kind of evil team of lawyers from Warner Brothers telling me that I wasn't allowed to ask him certain things. He was actually pretty open. There were a number of other YouTube channels that also got to talk to him. They all did a group chat where they took turns asking him questions. I just talked to him alone with just the two of us, so like I wasn't part of that group talk. It was just me and James Gunn. Just a couple of dudes being dudes talking about comic books. So if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. There is a bunch of big DC stuff coming up too, which I'll address during our talk that we had together during this. Surprisingly, the reason why I actually got to talk to James Gunn was because he reached out to me because he liked all the DC videos that I made for the TV shows, the movies the past couple of years, like the Superman videos, Peacemaker episode videos, Creature Commandos. I'll be doing weekly episode videos for Lanterns when it starts next year. Originally, when he reached out, I actually thought that I was in trouble for something, like it was a setup, and when I dialed in, there'd be some lawyer serving me with papers or something on the other end. But it turns out he was just trying to say thank you for all the videos, and he actually does like people making videos about the stuff that he does, picking apart the stuff that he does. Then he just also happened to tell me about the future of the DCU. So, just starting with that, the ending of Peacemaker with Rick Flag leaving him on the Salvation Planet in the other universes was intended to be a much bigger teaser than most people thought, and he said it would be a pretty big part of the Man of Tomorrow plot. Probably the biggest follow up to that was him saying that they're not doing all the Darkseid subplot from that Salvation Run storyline in the comics during Man of Tomorrow. We also talked a little bit about George R. R. Martin because the Salvation Run storyline was actually originally pitched by George R. R. Martin a long time ago, and when he wrote that, he didn't realize that George R. R. Martin had did that just because George R. R. Martin has a long history in comic books in addition to all of his Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire work. So I did get to talk to him a little bit about Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, even though it was mostly about the DC movies, DC TV shows. Also turns out James Gunn is well aware that I also make a lot of Game of Thrones videos, House of the Dragon, now Night of the Seven Kingdoms. But according to him, they're just adapting the aspect of the Salvation story where the government sends metahumans to the planet in the other universe. It won't secretly be revealed as a training ground for Apocalypse, so don't expect Darkseid himself or any of his lieutenants to show up in the Man of Tomorrow movie. Like there won't be a post-credit scene where Darkseid shows up at the end. Like I said earlier, he thinks it'd be way too similar to what Marvel did with Thanos at the end of that first Avengers movie.
Things that it would be fun to examine there.
Next, really big, probably the biggest reveal, is that Darkseid won't be the overarching big bad for the DCU because Zack Snyder literally just did him during the Justice League Snyder Cut, and he said he wants to be different from what's been done before in the DC movies, all DC movies. This is also why his Justice League will be very different from Zack Snyder's Justice League, and because Darkseid just reads too similar to what Marvel did with Thanos during the Infinity Saga over 10 plus years, so he doesn't want to just do DC's version of Thanos. Even though comic book fans know the difference, most of the casual people going to these movies will just see him as another version of Thanos. But he did say that he is very excited to do New Gods in Fourth World Jack Kirby characters like that. So just because the next Justice League movie won't be building towards Darkseid as the big villain doesn't mean that he won't be doing Fourth World characters in the movies and the TV shows. So it's not like he's completely swerving on Darkseid altogether. He specifically pointed out the Mr. Miracle TV show that they're working on right now with Tom King, based on his Mr. Miracle comic book. That's going to be the first thing that features the Fourth World New Gods characters in a really big way. So it's going to look and feel very different from the way Zack Snyder did those characters in his Justice League movie. If you've not read the Tom King Mr. Miracle comic book, it is super trippy, super meta. I'll do episode videos for that when it does release, but the way he talked about it, they're still working on the scripts for that, so it's probably not going to release at least until 2027, so it's going to be a while before we actually get a trailer for that. There were a number of major villains that could take the place of Darkseid, though, as a legit overarching villain in the new Justice League movie that they're eventually going to build up to, like their big team-up movies. There's people like Brainiac, Lex Luthor and the Injustice League, Sinestro, Necron, if you're talking about Blackest Night, Hal Jordan as a version of Parallax, the Anti-Monitor, Vandal Savage. There are just many, many other, even weirder twists and villains that they could also use, but it does sound like, just based on the way he was talking about it, the new version of the Justice League team will mostly stick with more relatable villains first, just because the bigger team-up movies, the future Justice League movies, need to be more accessible for casual audiences who aren't as down for the super deep-cut characters or the weirder characters. Normally when people talk about this phenomenon, they always point towards Guardians of the Galaxy, like talking tree, talking raccoon. James Gunn can do weirder characters that can be successful. Just based on the way he talked about it, he's being a little bit safer with the bigger team-up movies. In the weirder stuff, he will leave for like the side projects, like the TV shows especially, and the smaller movies. I couldn't get him to confirm who the next big Justice League villain is going to be, but it does sound like it makes more sense for them to do something like Lex Luthor in the Injustice League or Brainiac before he tries doing another live-action version of Anti-Monitor, because they just did live-action Anti-Monitor during the Arrowverse Crisis on Infinite Earths. I did all kinds of videos for that a couple years ago when it happened. James Gunn said his big thing was not repeating villains in the same way. Also, Marvel is doing Avengers Doomsday next year and then Secret Wars in 2027, which are huge multiverse crossover team-up movies in the same way DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths would be in the movies. So I don't think that he ever do Crisis on Infinite Earths in the live-action movies. Also, if you remember, before they hired James Gunn to come on and be their new Kevin Feige and reboot with the DCU plan for the movies, the previous regime that they had in place that was going to bring Henry Cavill back and like all the other DCEU actors were going to build to a version of Crisis on Infinite Earths in the movies. So it sounds like James Gunn, when he came in, was like, okay, we'll do our completely different, completely separate plan. Right now, the next two big things that they're releasing are the Lanterns, Green Lantern HBO series, and the Supergirl movie. I was not able to get him to say exactly when the Lanterns episodes are going to release. There's a whole bunch of business suits at HBO that actually program when the shows release year to year in order to line up with award seasons for the Emmys. It'll probably be after Euphoria Season 3 episodes, but before the Supergirl movie comes out. We talked a little bit about the Arrowverse and the Nazi planet because of their whole Crisis on Earth X crossover that they did a couple years ago. He did say that there's always a chance that Keith returns for revenge later, but it's not something that they're going to deal with during the Man of Tomorrow movie or anytime soon. So for now, the Nazi planet is just a hanging plot thread that he can go back to if he wants to, or if it makes sense for some other TV show. But it's not going to turn into some much bigger storyline. Like, it's not intended to be a big teaser for things to come. Like, the Nazi Justice League isn't going to come pouring out of the quantum unfolding chamber through their universe or anything like that.
Fighting a government that's run by Nazis. I mean, I don't know really what they're going to do.
He also said when it comes to stuff like that, the concern is logistically what they're doing with the Pocket Universe storyline in the next couple of movies and TV shows. Part of the whole reason why he made Lex Luthor's man, Sidney Happerson, rig it up for site-to-site teleporting between the DCU and Salvation so they can just open up the door and go straight to Salvation is so that he, James Gunn, didn't have to deal with the other 99 portals to other universes inside the quantum chamber every time somebody wants to go to the Salvation planet in the Man of Tomorrow movie. So like every time they want to dump another metahuman on Salvation or Rick Flag wants to go there, they don't need to walk past all the other 99 other universes with like the little gnomes coming out of the Candyland dimension or the weird neighbor alien burning rats or any of the other dimensions in general, like Keith jumping out of the shadows from his universe to attack them. But this isn't the absolute end of that inside space of the Pocket Universe, and he also made it sound like he was confirming that the Pocket Universe itself, like that box that the alien had that opened up that pocket dimension, was not meant to be a mother box. There are a lot of theories about that. He did joke about that he actually watches everybody's theories online just to see what everybody is thinking and how close they are to what he's actually doing. So part of the idea is that when they do go back to the quantum unfolding chamber, like the inside of that space with the other 99 universes, it'll be some other different TV show or movie that does it. Speaking of which, that other big Checkmate teaser at the end of Peacemaker Season 2, he confirmed that it was meant to be a big teaser for things to come for the 11th Street Kids just in general. Like, it wasn't just meant to be a throwaway joke and then they'll never go back to Checkmate, or like they're just going to be a running joke across the DCU. It will be a bigger thing. Here's the thing with that, though. The reason why he said they didn't immediately announce a Checkmate TV show right after the Peacemaker finale, just because it seemed like you would time something like that for the Peacemaker finale reveal, was mostly because he hasn't totally figured out the new TV show, like the Checkmate TV show, and how he wants that Checkmate group to cross over in the movies, like the 11th Street Kids. Meaning that for right now, Checkmate is probably just still going to be a small Easter egg in the background of Man of Tomorrow, like those characters aren't going to be a huge part of the plot for Man of Tomorrow. And even though they will cross over in future movies, Checkmate isn't meant to replace Argus, like Adebayo isn't meant to replace her mother, Amanda Waller, as a de facto character in the MCU. Like, she's not becoming the new Amanda Waller of the DCU. Just based on the vibe of my talk with him, it sounded like he's thinking more in the lines of a Checkmate TV show, and once he figures out the scripts for that, then they will do actual episodes. But it did sound like he wasn't going to force that, so if a stronger show, like a stronger idea for a show that the 11th Street Kids and Checkmate can be in, comes along, he will do that instead of doing a Checkmate TV show. Like, he's fine not doing a Checkmate spin-off project on its own. 100% though, there will be no Peacemaker Season 3, so the only major places the 11th Street Kids group, just in general, like the non-Peacemaker characters, will show up next are the Amanda Waller TV show, which is kind of its own separate thing that they're still working on scripts for, but he did say they were still working on, which will also address what Amanda Waller has been doing right now during the events of Peacemaker Season 2 while this alternate universe subplot has been going on. The Superman movie and now the Man of Tomorrow movie are happening. She has been very busy. And just because of how important James Gunn said the Salvation Planet is going to be in Man of Tomorrow, it did sound like a confirmation that Peacemaker will be back and that. I was able to joke with him a lot about Peacemaker coming back, like, what if you just had him in the background on a monitor riding a dinosaur? That's all you really need to do with Peacemaker.
That's a pretty good idea. I want to see Peacemaker. If you ever see Peacemaker riding a dinosaur, you know it's because of you.
Seriously though, I did think it was cool that he legitimately listens to our ideas and theories online and will sometimes incorporate them into the plots of movies and TV shows, although I do not expect him to actually add this to the Man of Tomorrow movie. We talked a little bit more about Man of Tomorrow and the future of the movies. He did confirm that he's trying to make everything feel very different from everything that's come before, most recently with the Snyderverse, DCEU movies, TV shows, and everything that Marvel has done so far. The Superman movie is probably the best example for that right now. Like, it feels totally different from what he did in Marvel and what the Snyderverse movies were. But he also did say that not all the DC movies will be in that same tone. Like Man of Tomorrow, for instance, which he is writing and directing right now, will also feel very different from the Superman movie. Mostly I think what he meant by that was that it won't be nearly as goofy with its references and jokes. Lex Luthor himself won't be quite as over the top as he got during the Superman movie. His cameo scene on Peacemaker, where he got a little colder and more calculating, was a good example of that. Generally just felt like he and Nicholas Hoult are still figuring out that Lex Luthor character. He has confirmed that the title Man of Tomorrow is both a reference to Superman and Lex Luthor, much more Lex Luthor than Superman, and it's more of a Lex Luthor movie than the first Superman movie was, where he was more of a side character in Superman's perspective. Way more of Man of Tomorrow will be told from Lex Luthor's perspective, and he did say that he was fascinated with Lex Luthor as a character just in general, like he identified with him as a character. Generally, the movie is meant to be more of a twisted kind of buddy cop movie where they're forced to team up to stop a larger threat that the Superman is not powerful enough to stop by himself or even with the Justice Gang characters without the help of Lex Luthor. I was not able to get James Gunn to confirm that Brainiac is the main villain of Man of Tomorrow. I was only able to talk to him for about 15 minutes, so there were a ton of questions that I was not able to actually get to with him. But just because of how different he said he was trying to be with the DCU from previous DCU movies makes it seem like the likelihood of Brainiac just shot up to 99%. Pretty much every big major event, villain, is now on the board in terms of stories and theory crafting that has not been done in a big way in live action before. Probably one of the best examples of that is Gorilla Grodd is meant to be connected to the Jimmy Olsen Daily Planet TV show on HBO. He didn't say a ton of else about that one specifically or the Mr. Terrific HBO series, but they are doing those, and it sounds like it's still early days. They're still working on scripts before start making big announcements about them. When it comes to all the cosmic stuff in the DCU, it sounds like James Gunn is waiting more on the Lanterns episodes next year and the Supergirl movie to start before he starts talking more about Green Lantern Corps, War of Light, Sinestro Corps, other Lantern Corps, like really, really big cosmic stories. There are a lot of people asking if he's ever going to do a live-action version of Blackest Night as like a big team-up movie crossover. Green Lantern lore is just a good example because of how DC got scared away from Green Lantern stuff after the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie that even made Zack Snyder take away his Green Lantern stuff in the Justice League Snyder Cut, even though he shot on his own dime. So just fertile territory for James Gunn, but I'm not expecting him to go straight to Blackest Night or anything like that.
I knew that if we were going to get things started, I had to dive in and just go full force. And
When it actually came to Batman, he'd already talked so much about the new DCU Batman so much, I didn't try to ask him too many questions about like who's going to be the new Batman or what's happening with Batman Brave and the Bold, just because I knew he was going to answer a ton of questions about that. They haven't cast an actor yet, but they have changed a lot of what the story was going to be since he announced it a couple years ago, so I've already done a couple videos about that. I'll link them in the description below. I was bummed that I didn't get the chance to ask him about the new version of The Flash. He's already talked a little bit about the new version of Wonder Woman. That's going to happen before a new Flash. Probably still going to be a couple years before a legit Flash shows up on screen. We will see which version of The Flash that winds up being, though. My bet, just because he is trying to be different, and based on evidence from the Superman movie Easter eggs that we actually saw in the background, it'll wind up being the Wally West Flash on his new Justice League, not the Barry Allen Flash. And just because everybody's always asking about Grant Gustin, other DCEU or DC actors from the past several years coming back, James Gunn has said previously he's totally fine with actors coming back and playing new characters. Speaking of The Flash, he even joked about Michael Rooker coming back again after just doing a couple different DC characters with him in different movies, like his Suicide Squad character, then his new Peacemaker character, but also coming back as a new version of The Flash, even though that was meant to be a joke. He will be legitimately bringing Michael Rooker back as some other DC character in the future, like some bigger ongoing character. So if he's willing to bring Michael Rooker back as a third different DC character in more recent movies, then yes, it's totally possible for other big DC actors to come back. Jason Momoa's Lobo is probably the best, most recent example of that like very high-profile actor coming back. I am sure there are a billion other questions that everybody has about my talk with him or things he said specifically or other upcoming DC movies or TV shows, so if there's anything that I didn't talk about in this video or didn't address, just write them below in the comments and I'll try to answer them in the comments. Generally, it's just really cool that he actually took the time to sit down and talk to me one-on-one. Hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to him again about some other future DC movies, like when Batman comes out in a couple years. I just did a whole bunch of New York Comic Con trailer videos. Click here for all those, and click here for my longer Superman Man of Tomorrow video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.